Hey everybody, welcome to our ESPN Esports VALORANT show every single Thursday at usually 8 p.m. Eastern. We pushed it back an hour. We had a great Fortnite tournament on the channel, so we started an hour later, but we got lots to talk about here. Arda, Tyler, Emily, and Jacob with you. First things first, massive name. There is a sweepstakes going on right now, Tyler. You have tweeted it. Let's talk about it. Nitro, let's just get right to it.
Man.
To the chase. Where is he going? What's happening?
Oh man, so this is a long. It's kind of a long. It's been a very long last 4 days since I broke the news that Nitro is moving to Valorant. It's also coupled the fact that our colleague here, Jacob Wolf, interviewed Nitro the day after I broke the news. Not very coincidental. Neither were kind of linked up, but everything just kind of came together at the right time. But let's go back to when I first found out Nitro was moving. This was about Sunday night, Monday afternoon. I started hearing murmurs of Nitro's moving to Valorant. Nitro's moving to Valorant. He's going. Players, coaches, managers. It was a thing of just, he's on the market. Teams are inquiring. It's a big push. The sweepstakes is on, essentially, where Monday night, there's tons of teams looking into him, teams sending their way. Prodigy, obviously, we have an interview with Jerome coming up in this show, where he got signed by Prodigy. So the sweepstakes is on. Teams have kind of, put out their best offers, talked to him, inquired, where does he want to go, what is his head is in. And as the days have gone along, that list has been whittled down, where it's gone to a point where I've had teams tell me that they've been ghosted, essentially, where he seems very sure of where he's going to go or where he wants to go, where the final team's kind of on his list. And currently, as we can say right now, at this moment, it's not confirmed because he has switched. The front runners have switched during this process, but right now the front runner to sign Nitro, the legendary IGL of Team Liquid, who won the IEM Grand Slam last year, is 100 Thieves. 100 Thieves currently seem to be the front runner for Nitro. From what I've been told by multiple sources, they are in deep discussion with the IGL, where not only are, from what I've been told, are offering the best financial package, but they are also offering things that other teams cannot, namely freedom in creating a roster, where a lot of these other rosters in North America seem very tight, maybe one or two players to be switched out with Nitro coming in. 100 Thieves, as we have been talking about for a long time, is not the most stable of rosters. They have not made it out of the group stages the last two Ignition Series events. If this does go through, if Nitro does sign up 100 Thieves, it does feel like it would be Hiko and Nitro kind of constructing the roster between the two of them, and it would kind of give them the freedom to create the team they want to create. And they're not in the upcoming Pop Flash Nation Series tournament, the last one in North America, and they just recently pulled out of the Pittsburgh Night Gauntlet Series, which is happening this weekend. So right now, deep talks, Nitro and 100 Thieves. I know a lot of 100 Thieves fans right now are very excited. It seems like this would be the way it's going to go. I don't want to say confirmed yet, but it's been a topsy-turvy road. 100 Thieves have been very aggressive on the market.
So, okay, let's unpack a couple things there. The first thing we should mention is you mentioned deep discussions. This is not signed or confirmed right now. This is not Nitro is going to 100 Thieves. This is Nitro and 100 Thieves are in discussions. It could happen.
Yeah, they are from multiple sources. They're in deep discussions. Most people expect him to sign there. They've been very aggressive. That's one of the most. I want to kind of clear that. So one of the biggest misconceptions of 100 Thieves is that they don't care about their Valorant squad. That is the opposite of the truth. They have been one of, if not the most aggressive squad, along with the T1s and G2s of the world, where they're in all these discussions. They were in on Skadoodle. They obviously got Hiko, who was one of the biggest free agents in all of Valorant early on in the beta phase. So they've been on a lot of these free agents, and I think people saw them picking up the PUBG guys as they don't care about Valorant. They don't really care. The reason they picked up the high ground guys, the PUBG guys, is because they were performing really extremely well in scrimmages and looked really good in tournaments before they signed them, and they hoped that they could continue that momentum with Hiko on 100 Thieves. Obviously didn't happen, but I do think this is a statement of 100 Thieves saying, we are taking Valorant as seriously as anyone in the scene. They see Nitro as a piece that can bring them a championship in the future. And they obviously think Hiko and Nitro, if they pair those two together, they can create a world championship team.
What is the relationship what is the relationship like between Nitro and Hiko?
That's where Jacob comes in,
concern,
the Counter-Strike expert.
Yeah, so I mean, I got a chance to catch up with Nitro on Tuesday for a feature piece we just put out on ESPN.com/esports, and he said in that piece, verbatim, that the Team Liquid lineup that included Hiko in 2016, the one that placed top 4 at MLG Columbus and then placed second at ESL1 Cologne that year, was the most toxic team he had ever been in. And if you know anything about that team, that's probably not that surprising. He said that like there were moments where people didn't want to practice, they were giving up in practice, they didn't want to play games, it was miserable, but they won a lot. They were winning. They were like kind of one of the first teams in North American Counter-Strike to really start being a top 10 team. And so like that made them feel good, as bad as things were kind of behind the curtain. And yeah, I mean, Simple was a part of that team, and Simple, as good as he is now and revered as he is now, back then he was just like a really young player who was incredibly immature. He was very skilled. Everybody thought that he was going to become the superstar that he has become today, but he was not good at communicating. He was a very terrible communicator and often enjoyed to be either very loud or very rude in the way that he communicated to his teammates. If you remember, also, Hiko and Simple had a very good relationship. Hiko was almost like big brother to him. And so I feel like, at least within that team, a lot of people didn't like either of them, but they disliked Hiko more because he was a defender of Simple, less because he actually was more of an issue. But let's be clear, like, Hiko's had his own ego issues over the years too, and definitely, like, right before he made that signing, he was supposed to make this super team with Skadoodle and Alu and all these other people that did not work out. So he was riding high, thinking he was going to come into Liquid and like run things when Nitro and Elige had been like the cornerstones of that roster for such a long time. So yeah, those guys were definitely at odds. Like there was definitely beef back in 2016, and I think that even up until recently, like I think that they're both mature enough to like go back to the table and work it out and like work for a commonality goal. But yeah, like I don't think that they were on the best of footing. But again, like money kind of fixes everything, and it seems like both of them are going to be in a pretty good financial situation if this 100 Thieves thing works out.
Speaking of money, Emily, I do want to get your thoughts really quickly, though, Tyler. I just want to go back and add a little bit more color to the reporting here. So 100 Thieves is the org that you mentioned are in deep talks, but are there any other orgs that are vying for his services? What else can you say about this?
There were several teams that were in or are still on Nitro. That's the thing. Like, even today, teams have still reached out to see if they can talk to Nitro, but it does seem from talking to multiple people that it has come down to essentially 100 Thieves. I know T1 were in talks. Some other organizations that haven't even began, Valorant organization have been told we're inquiring about possibly making Nitro kind of the centerpiece. Pretty much any NA team, logically, that you can think of in the scene should have reached out to Nitro if they had the funds available. I talked to a few teams who said, yeah, we would love Nitro. Nitro would be an amazing captain, in-game leader, but we know his price is out of the market for a lot of these teams.
What do you think his price is? Let's estimate. We have an idea of what the Valorant salaries are out there. 15K a month, 10K a month, 20K a month. Some people.
It has to be over 20. It would have to be over 20K a month. I would have to believe, from what I've heard from other teams.
Yeah, I mean, my guess would be give or take $250,000 to $350,000, $50,000 a year. I think that a lot of Sentinels was like a barometer market, and I think they're somewhere in that range, depending on the player we're talking about. Like, Sentinels really came out the gate and just like hit the giant like bat, right? Like, they are the ones that what website was it? There was a website that did like a survey of medium. It was Esports Observer, I think. That did a medium average. I think that they had too many outliers in that, but they had too many outliers because people like Sentinels spent big, and everybody thought it was a good idea to spend big right after Sentinels. So
right.
I think like
Emily,
yeah, that's my thought. But yes,
Emily,
I think it's a lot of money.
Emily, your thoughts on the possible pairing of Nitro and Hiko, and also how much money he would command?
I mean, I think the big thing for me is going back to what we talked about when the 100 Thieves roster was first formed, and we had that kind of uncertainty as to whether Hiko really wanted to play with this team, not because he had a problem with the former Team High Ground guys, but because he really wanted to make his own team, right? So to me, the big thing is if he does sign with 100 Thieves, it's going to be, him and Nitro, and they're going to have to agree with each other on what kind of team they want and who they want to bring onto this roster. But if you're looking at how 100 Thieves are moving from their first roster construction, which was signing a really big name and then picking up 4 of a 5 stack and just kind of mashing those together to see if that was going to work. And obviously, like, I still think it's pretty early, but people are expecting results like immediately. So if they are changing this roster, I think they will. And again, like Tyler mentioned, they're not going to be in Flashpoint's event. They just pulled out of another event. So that all lines up with getting Nitro and having him and Hiko really sit down and be like, okay, who do we want to play for? What is this roster going to look like? What kind of style do we want to go for? What do way we want our communication to be? And like, I don't think this should even reflect too terribly on the like former Team High Ground guys if they do get let go. Like, I actually do hope someone gives them another chance because maybe it just didn't work out with this team.
Maybe Jason R will.
Oh my god, our good old friend Jason R. Like, I think that's what's most interesting to me is because like when we first talked about 100 Thieves, we were all kind of surprised, and Hiko seemed very surprised because it seemed like part of his signing was, we're going to bring you on, you're our guy, make this roster, like you're going to be the main voice, right? And then they signed this 4 stack, and he did come out and say, like, I don't have a problem with these guys, we've been getting along really well, it's totally fine, but like, obviously for whatever reason, it hasn't worked yet, right? Like, they have not clicked. And it's not like a Sentinels thing where they just needed a few bad, tournaments to get through before they ended up coming together. So hopefully, I mean, if the 100 team move happens, which I would love to see just for like the drama of it, I'm really curious to see what kind of team Nitro and Hiko would come up with and construct if they're given that, basically that caveat of like, you guys are designing the team this time. We're not going to sign anyone else.
Well, of
I just
course,
want to point out, by the way, I know we like hammer COVID stuff on this show all the time, but I do want to point out something that Nitro said that was really interesting, is that part of the reason he is leaving CS is because the daily routine felt so repetitive for him at the end of his time in Counter-Strike. If you've been following CS, like, there's such an oversaturation in tournaments. And I mean, that's the word he used when talking to me. And the fact that like every single day for him, basically, or like every single weekend, became playing Evil Geniuses, Furia, or Gen G in a top Counter-Strike event where it was only North American teams, no more Navi, no more Astralis that they could get their hands on, right? Like, all it was the same North American teams, and he was slumping, and he felt like he was kind of out of it, and like it just got repetitive. Like, he got really kind of just like kind of bummed out on a mental health perspective because everything was just the same. And he like said in the interview I did with him that like Valorant is kind of this like new frontier for him where he can go and try to be the best in the world again. He has a new goal that he can look forward to rather than just like plopping his butt down in his chair in his Louisiana home and just like running it back against the same 4 or 5 teams that you play against in NA Counter-Strike. So I think it's a really good move for him on a personal level. Yeah, I'm excited to sort of see where he lands, but if I was a betting man, I would say it's 100 Thieves.
So to recap, for those that are just joining us, the leading organization in signing Nitro, Tyler, has mentioned that they are in deep discussions, though no deal has been reached thus far, is 100 Thieves. They are in the lead. That's as far as we can go with it. There are other orgs in the conversation. Some orgs have looked at this and said, maybe the price tag is a little bit too much for our blood. But 100 Thieves right now seems to be in the lead, so there could be an announcement in the near future. One thing that we do know is that his agent and his management of record, Prodigy, Jerome Coupez, the CEO, Jacob did an interview with him. The full interview will be posted at ESPN or at youtube.com/ESPN Esports. But here is a clip where he talks about Nitro and future plans.
Hi, this is Jacob Wolf with ESPN Esports, and I am joined by Jerome Coupez, the CEO of Prodigy Agency, one of the biggest European agencies in all of esports, famous for representing players in Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and more recently Valorant. Jerome, how are you?
Hey, I'm fine, thank you. I'm glad to be there. Thank you for the invitation. And how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I got to start with something very important, something we're talking on our Valorant show, and also something that's been the talk a lot this week. So you all signed Nitro as a to represent him. Obviously, the news is out there. He told me earlier this week in an interview that he is moving to Valorant. He is obviously one of the hottest free agents, I think, for many people in Valorant. A lot of people are interested in him. What was that like what has that like been so far working with him and trying to find him a home in Valorant?
I think that Nitro is, let's say, one of the best CSGO players in NA. He has a legacy on CSGO, so I would say it's not that complicated to find a new home for Nitro, no matter it is CSGO or Valorant, right? Especially with his leadership capacity. He can be the in-game leader on both games. So I think the traction is really great, and I'm confident that, we will find and announce a new home pretty soon. A pretty exciting project, I might say.
What's made Nitro really interesting, I think, for many people is he is the first Counter-Strike player who less than a year ago was one of the best. You know, Team Liquid was the best team in the world last July. And won ESL 1 Cologne and won the Grand Slam and everything. And now he's making that switch a year later. Not many of the other players in Valorant have been that successful, or at least haven't been that successful recently. People like Mixwell and Scream obviously had good careers in Counter-Strike, but their peaks, I guess, were some time ago, a few years ago. Do you think that we're going to see, knowing what you know about Counter-Strike players in Europe, do you think we'll see any of the players, top players in European Counter-Strike make the jump to Valorant in the near future?
I think we might see a few really big names coming, but I don't think that we will see some of the very best players right now, like playing top 5, top 10 teams doing the switch. I would say that they will stay on CSGO, but I know for a fact that we will see some really big names coming to Valorant very soon. But not the active rosters in top 5, top 10 teams, right? But some very big players.
Still here on the ESPN Esports Valorant show. Of course, the big topic of discussion this week is Nitro. Where will he go? The leading team, according to Tyler Erzberger and Jacob Wolf's reporting, is 100 Thieves. No deal official yet. No public announcement. All we know is that the leading team, deep discussions is how it's being described, is 100 Thieves. There are other teams in the mix. Some teams have backed out, according to sources, due to the fact that the price tag might be too high. But this begs the question, Tyler, if, let's hypothetically say, Nitro does join 100 Thieves. Now he's with Hiko, the reunion there, former CSGO pros. What about the rest of the team? What will the rest of the team look like if those two are the anchors?
All right, so on this point, this is all guesstimation by us. I don't think any of us have any sort of clue of who they would want to sign. I think they want to sign Nitro first, get this lockdown. It's not confirmed. He's still the prize, free agent on the market. Get that done, and then, you have weeks to kind of build out the roster since they're not in any tournaments. I think the player right now that I'm looking at in the scene who just switched a week ago is Android. Android announced that he was retiring from CSGO a week ago. He's been on the Complexity, Team Envy, very accomplished CSGO player. I talked to a few players, a few managers about, like, if the Hiko Nitro thing does happen, who should they sign? And I got a lot of feedback of, like, if this happens, if it's Nitro and Hiko, it's going to be a CSGO, base team. And I think Android, a player who is very new to the game, he's only been playing for 7 days. He just tweeted out about 15 minutes ago that he just hit Immortal 3 after switching literally 7 days ago. So I think he's a player where, if you are 100 Thieves, you can now take your time for this roster. I think they made their first roster so they could play in the first Ignition Series event. I think they saw they had a very short limited window to get a roster together to play in that. They did not want to miss out on a good first impression. Now that the scene has kind of solidified, we're seeing viewership going up. NA scene seems to be the most it has the most momentum behind it of any other region right now in Valorant, I would say, along with Japan, who's also doing crazy numbers. But for 100 Thieves, I think Android's a player you look at and say, we don't have to rush into this. This is a guy that you, if you have Nitro, you have Hiko, he gets time in a team, he could be a really big player in the scene. And I just, through a week, he's already Immortal 3. Obviously, a lot of CSGO pros are going to, if they play the game, are going to be quite good at that. But I think Android, from people I've talked to, said would be a really good fit with these guys. So Android would be my pick. I think he's a long-term project, but I think 100 Thieves in itself is a long-term project. So not a bad thing.
I mean, I look at like someone like Roca, who former Counter-Strike player, also does not have the best end to his Counter-Strike career in terms of prestigious teams. We've talked about this, about players who were once good at Counter-Strike, at the top of Counter-Strike or near the top of Counter-Strike, making the switch. Roca is someone I think that has been really motivated. I've been paying attention to his social media throughout all of this. He announced in May that he would be switching to Valorant. In an interview with Dust2, which is one of the American off-spin sites of HLTV, where he talked in depth about like how motivated he was to sort of get to the top again. I used to love watching Roca play on EchoFox and Complexity and some of the other teams he was on back in the day in CS, and I always thought he was really talented, but just did not have the right like staff or the right players around him necessarily to succeed. I think we are seeing in Valorant with sort of like new landscapes, esports being a little bit more mature than it was at some point in Counter-Strike 4 or 5 years ago, that some of those guys are really excelling in new environments. Wardell's a great example of this, right?
Yeah.
Like he was kind of on the come up. He was on the come up at the end of his Counter-Strike career before he made the switch, but like we never really saw him be a star, and now he's like one of the best players in all of Valorant, right? Because that switch just like kind of hit him on fire. And it's helped him significantly as a brand too. So someone like Roca, somebody like Roca would be like really incredible in my opinion. Like I think giving him that opportunity to really prove himself again would be great. And
Roca, also during the last in this series event was probably one of the standout players in the group stage. He's one of the few Reyna players in pro scene, along with Scream and Corey, that really impressed me. He looked like a man possessed versus TSM. They even took a map off, the eventual winners of the entire event. So Roca was on Bloom. Bloom is not an official organization, so he is a free agent. That is also a player I think that, like, given some seasoning, giving some time, he's also a player that could become a superstar in the scene. And I think, as we're going to talk about 100 Thieves, Nitro, this is a long-term project now, and that they have to look at this with a long lens, because I think NA has a very strong scene. I think like Valorant's kind of proven that it can work in North America, and I think 100 Thieves, from everything I've heard, everything I've seen, has been very aggressive and committed to Valorant. Valorant is something that 100 Thieves is going to be with for a very long time, and they've kind of set this. They're putting their foot down and saying, we're going to be in the scene, and we're going to be a pillar of it. So,
and look, whether Nitro joins 100 Thieves or not, a change is coming to 100 Thieves. Right? Like, obviously, it all signs point to Nitro being the start of that change.
They
but a
pulled
change
out.
is coming.
Yeah, like they pulled out of a tournament, which tells me that they're going to go through roster changes. I do want to make a slight case for keeping Venerated, regardless of what they want to do, because I think in 100 Thieves' struggles, he's been a really strong, like, bright spot for them. Individually, and so provided that the relationship between him and Hiko isn't for whatever reason like damaged in some way where they wouldn't be able to play together, I think he's made a case for himself to keep him on a roster, unless they do want to do something similar to TSM where they bring in Nitro and they're just like, we're going all CS, which I honestly think has proven to be like, yes, a formula for success, but also we've seen a ton of teams shed their, like, Overwatch sucks, Fortnite sucks. Like, I don't think you can pinpoint it down to the X person played Y game previously, therefore they don't have hands, which is still, unfortunately, a prevailing narrative, but it really shouldn't be, especially after the success of a team like Sentinels. So I do hope that even if they decide not to keep Venerated, he ends up on a strong roster, because I think he is really talented. And if he's not going to be playing with that stack anymore, and he's not going to be on 100 Thieves anymore, if they do make like just sweeping roster changes, I'll be curious to see where he ends up, because I think he has been an individual bright spot on that roster.
One final point on this before we move on. We have a lot to talk about on this show. And by the way, for the new viewers, this ESPN Esports Valorant show is usually every single Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, and Tyler has a Valorant Power Ranking show on Mondays at 9 p.m. Eastern. this continues to build the bridge for more quality CSGO players to join Valorant. Now we're getting into that territory where it's not just CSGO has-beens that are looking at Valorant anymore. Former middle-of-the-road pros, and I'm not knocking anybody, okay? I'm not saying that they were bad. I'm not saying that their
I'm only
careers were
laughing
garbage.
at
I'm
Jacob's
just saying,
face. Yeah.
I'm just saying that now we're getting to the point where we can even start to imagine where CSGO players that are worth their weight are suddenly looking at Valorant. They probably already are. They probably have comfortable lives in CSGO, but Jacob made a very good point about the monotony of the game. At some point, it's going to become too routine for you, and you're going to look for a new challenge because competitors at the end of the day always want to strive for the next goal. And for a CSGO player, the next logical goal can very well be Valorant.
In North America.
In North America.
It's
North
because
America.
North America has been so...
North America.
It's
But
because of
could
COVID.
that change in the next year or two?
So I actually did ask Jerome Coupez from Prodigy about this today, and he said that he did not anticipate, and he was talking about Europe, said he did not anticipate like the top 1% of Counter-Strike pros to do this. Like we're talking like Simple, etc., right? Like those guys, they played actually in beta. A lot of those guys played in beta and alpha. Like some of them were a part of the alpha testing. I remember like talking to some of them about that also. Shocks and some of the other guys at that top level. But like Jerome's like, he's like, I don't think you're going to see anybody who's like on a top 10 team right now jump from Counter-Strike to Valorant. He's like, but I do think you're going to start seeing more people who, like Nitro, were on a good team previously, or like more recently, like within the past like year, were on a good team, making the switch from Counter-Strike to Valorant. The big thing is the fact that right now, if you are a top Counter-Strike player, Simple, etc., right, you make enough money that you don't need to make that switch. There are people, though, that do not make enough money and have an opportunity to make significantly more money by making the switch, and they will do that. So I do expect that we'll get better Counter-Strike pros than what we have right now making the jump, in Europe included in that statement. So
we're going to get to our news and notes in a second. The logical transition here from talking to 100 Thieves is I want to jump to, I believe it is Beast Coast, because Beast Coast has a 100T connection. They have acquired Elevate on loan. So this is like our first high-profile, long-term loan, very reminiscent of soccer where teams lend their players to other teams here. But doesn't this feel like Elevate will probably not return to 100 Thieves to you?
I mean, not necessarily. I also think this is another way of 100 Thieves showing how committed they are to the Valorant scene, right? Where Elevate's an 18-year-old kid. He's coming over from Fortnite. He's quite good at the game. He is on the cusp of being a pro player. He can easily fit onto one of the very, top 10 to 15 teams in North America. He has a lot of potential. And then 100 Thieves, if they're building out a roster of veterans like Hiko and Nitro, they want to win now. This is a team that is going to be built for, they've already tried the project of let's see how this goes. We'll throw in some players that we don't necessarily know how they're going to gel. We'll see how it goes. I think of Elevate, he goes to Beast Coast. He is still part of the 100 Thieves brand, necessarily. And you now have 6 months where he's going to grind and be playing in these big tournaments. And he's going to get to grow and mature as a pro player. While in a parallel, like, side by side, we're going to have 100 Thieves with their new roster and what they're going to create. And in 6 months' time, if Elevate's a top player and he's showing that he's, performing well and they're doing well in these Ignition Series style tournaments, maybe even when we can actually have LANs, he's at LAN tournaments with 100 Thieves going against each other, they can bring him back in and say, hey, maybe we want to switch out one of our 100 Thieves players for Elevate. If not, and both teams are doing well, it could be a thing now you can sell Elevate's contract to a tier 1 organization that's looking for a big talent. So I think this is a great move for all parties involved. Elevate now can play in these, pro tournaments, grind the game as hard as he can. He wants to be a pro. He wants to be at that tier 1 level. He can now be in these tournaments. And for 100 Thieves, they get to watch a prospect of theirs grow while also building their own thing and maybe bring him in after the 6 months. So Beast Coast wins, Elevate wins, 100 Thieves wins. I think it's great for everyone involved.
What do you make of the Beast Coast roster?
They are a team that I think we have Jammies, you have Tig, you have a lot of these players who if you go on to any, like, if you go on a food stream, you go on a Sinatra stream, 10 stream, these guys are who are in constantly these games over and over and over. There are high elo players. I want to see how they can play in an actual, like, structured format. I think if with them actually being an infrastructure where they're going to be now grinding as a team together, I think they're going to grow a lot. I think this is a team that right now, I would not say is anywhere near the top 10, but give them, that 6-month period, and they can definitely, sneak into that top 10, maybe even, if everything gels together, become a top 5 team. Valorant right now is such a topsy-turvy world where you have Immortals where no one knew who any of those guys were 6 months ago, but now they're a top 3 team, in my opinion, in North America. So I'm excited about the youthful exuberance of this team. And it really shows the difference of how in North America, a 5-stack of high elo players can get a sponsor, where in Europe, we currently have the top 2 of the top 5 teams have to disband to find a sponsorship. So right now,
merge.
Yeah, or merge, exactly, where North America, just in terms of viewership and sponsorships and everything, and from YouTube views to everything, North American Valorant is on fire. Europe right now is trying to catch up. And I think with FPX and Team Liquid making their mark in the scene, we're going to see viewership hopefully go on the rise. But North America right now is definitely the number 1 league or region in Valorant in terms of views. No, I'm not saying in terms of strength. Who knows about that? We have to actually have a land before we can actually say that for sure. But in terms of momentum and viewership, it's North America.
Rise Nation is I know we wanted to talk about them a little bit. They're another one of those, like, this org just recently relaunched, and they're trying to sort of be back more in the discussion of esports as a whole and be relevant again after not being in Call of Duty franchising or not applying to be a Call of Duty franchise. Obviously, they were very big and when CWL was open circuit from a popularity perspective, and Rise is picking up the Charlotte Phoenix roster, or the ex-Charlotte Phoenix roster. I mean, led by Anger. You want to talk about another guy who, like, used to be a name in CS and is making this transition and trying to make another career. Anger's like the epitome of that, right? Like, I've watched so many Mythic games over the year. We used to watch him back on, like, Winter Fox and some of the other organizations he played for once upon a time. Like, this is a roster that, like, yeah, they're not a top 10 roster in North America, but
Top
like
20.
we've seen them. We've seen them in Ignition events and other events also, and, like, they're not terrible. Like, they have some potential, and maybe a few changes, like, they could get better. And yeah, so I'm cool with this. Like, it's a good way. A lot of these organizations, like Rise Nation and Beast Coast, like, they are on a different level financially than your C9s, TSMs, Sentinels, T1, etc. Like, we are talking millions of dollars spent on singular teams in one game in the cases of like, the fact that, like, Team Liquid's, like, League of Legends roster probably costs close to $2 million a year in salary between the 5 players, right? Like, that's insane. So, like, Rise Nation and Beast Coast don't have the type of money to roll that payroll out every single year. So for, like, signing rosters that are on any given day competitive and also not having to break the bank, like, I'm cool with both of these pickups. I think that they both have value, and I think they'll help develop either less experienced players or players who are trying to, like, rehabilitate themselves in a type of way, rehabilitate their image in Valorant in that regard. So I'm cool with that.
I will say this, in terms of Europe and its viewership compared to North America, there are a lot of non-English streams that are thriving.
Oh, it's Turkey, though. It's Turkey, baby. Turkey is carrying the European viewership right now. It's actually quite beautiful, Arda.
Tyler, you're too smart, man. You're like 800 IQ because you always telegraph what I'm about to say, and I can't get it out fast enough.
Yeah. God bless Turkey.
Here's the thing, and I'll tell you why. I have actually spoken with quite a few fans of Valorant in Turkey, but also the players. Turkey is a very nationalistic country. They're very proud of their people. This is obviously the case for many countries, but in particular Turkey. The other thing is there isn't a lot that Turkey in particular, as it pertains to competition, is the best at. They're good. Their soccer teams are good. Their martial arts teams are good. But there's not really much that Turkey as a country is number one at. And Valorant is an area where they can really contend. And we're seeing it right now in the Allied Esports Odyssey, with BBL not doing so well in groups right now, but even making it to the tournament. That was a big deal for Turkey. And we're seeing the ratio of Turkish players that are playing on other teams. That's a point of pride for the Turkish Valorant fans. And so they will follow these players no matter where they go. I would even go so far as to say, if I was a European org, and if I saw these Turkish players, a CNED, for example, or someone else of that ilk and that caliber, I would say maybe I should look to sign one of these players and hope that the language barrier can sort itself out, much like League of Legends teams that deal with it, such that I can attract that audience, because I know that I will have a built-in Turkish audience that will follow these players to my team, and that can be in place of the marketable player that European players orgs are looking for. I would seriously at least have conversations there to see if it would be a good fit.
Yeah,
that would. I was just gonna say, like, that's the Holy Phoenix League of Legends effect. Like, he prior to like Broken Blade and Niski like being incredibly relevant in League, like Holy Phoenix was this Turkish player that every time he went to Worlds, you just see like giant viewer spike through the roof when they would compete. The TCL team would compete in any types of Worlds matches. Like, this is not new for Turkey. Like, they are generally like lift them up in esports, and in League of Legends we always talk like, you know, North America, Europe, China, Korea. In Counter-Strike, though, like, countries that aren't as represented in player base, think Brazil, right? Like, they've had really good teams over the year, and they're just like you just see the viewership spike through the roof because everybody's like, you know, like wanting Brazil to be incredibly relevant in the esports space. And so I like that Valorant's this nice blend of, like, we get to see what that is in, or coming from like a League of Legends fan perspective, because it is a Riot game, but also because of Counter-Strike, because it's a first-person shooter and a lot of that audience is coming over. So it's nice. It's a nice blend.
Emily, last point on this?
I mean, you'd have to so my big thing that I've been complaining about with European orgs for a while, because I don't disagree with you, right? Not only because of the audience, but like, I feel like this is the exact kind of team similar to what I thought about Party Parrots and similar to what I thought about Fabricant when they were together, is that like, this is the kind of team that you can port over, give them like a stable environment, right? Like, and a better infrastructure, and watch them thrive. They've been performing, like, in my opinion, a lot better than I expected going into the Allied event. Like, yes, they haven't won anything, but like, they've been making their series pretty close, and they've looked better than I expected. And that's kind of like rife for an org to come in and pick up a 5-stack. However, European orgs have not been doing that. So you'd have to convince one of them to actually take a chance and pick up a full 5-stack instead of like continuing to hang back and picking and choosing players really slowly.
Let's move on to more Valorant news before we break down the tournaments. How about a big coup for Riot Games in Valorant, showing up on Shroud's return stream? Uncle Shroud decides he wants to stream Valorant to 500,000 people when he returns to Twitch in his exclusive deal. This is a big deal. I think this is great for Riot Games, but it also furthers the point that these streamers, Ninja, Shroud, you name it, they are doing this on their own accord. Compare it to Apex Legends last year, where streamers, and other games as well, Rogue Company is another one currently. These streamers are being paid upwards of millions of dollars to participate in creating content for this game. However, for Valorant, they are flocking to the game. That the Riot effect, the allure of playing Valorant is too great for them to deny and ignore.
Yeah, I mean, there's this like wide window of opportunity. Like, there's this wide window of opportunity. Like, the top streamers in Valorant are its pro players, right? Like Skadoodle, Wardell, etc., right? Like, but that's not like the same streaming level popularity as like a Shroud, right? Or a Ninja or any of these guys. Like, they are on a whole nother plateau. No one is the biggest streamer in Valorant right now in the way that Ninja was the biggest streamer in Fortnite for forever, right? So like, there's a window of opportunity for these guys to come in and be that guy, the Valorant guy on Twitch, or the Valorant guy on YouTube, or whatever platform they're on. So like, hell yeah, go for it. But it's great for Riot because they're not having to pay for it. It is organic. Shroud himself's a former CS player who like played a ton of Valorant early when it first came out. and he liked it and was streaming it on Mixer also. So yeah, I mean, big win for Riot with Shroud coming back, and I anticipate this will continue.
Emily,
well, and I feel like this is. Oh, I was just gonna say this is exactly why Riot wanted to, because like I do think there are criticisms you can make for not waiting for China to release at the same time, and we'll see the repercussions of that later on, I think, regarding whether it takes off in China or not. But the benefit is that, you know, in the West, especially in NA where Valorant has completely taken off, everyone's at home. So you have a ton of streamers. They're returning to platforms. Everything lines up where people are watching streams more than ever. And you have this new game that, again, they did a really good job of like seeding it, so to speak, right? Where they were like, we have this new game, come play it in the alpha. It's really cool. We've talked about this several times about how it was a game that everyone wanted to play. Everyone wanted to get their hands on and at least try out initially. And I mean, it makes it rife for stuff like this. And Riot definitely like seeded these kind of things. And this is exactly why I think they rushed the launch, right? Because the launch was definitely not supposed to happen this early. But this is how it has worked out.
I mean, it was supposed to be June 2nd. I think COVID kind of made it feel rushed.
Sure, absolutely. That could certainly be the case, and still time is being taken for a proper launch in China. One thing I want to break down viewership, not just from a competition perspective, but from a streaming perspective, Tyler. I know that you follow this very, very closely.
Yeah.
What I will say to set the table here is that with every event, in particular North America, that happens, we see increased viewership time and time again. I think FaZe did a fantastic job allowing co-streaming. Their numbers were impressive. Myth's numbers were impressive. The co-streamers' numbers were very impressive. Overall, I think FaZe really set the tone and the blueprint on how we should approach future major tournaments as it pertains to viewership and also co-streaming. But what about the streamers as well, Tyler? What kind of numbers are you noticing in terms of decrease, increase from streamers in Valorant as well?
Yeah, for this time you stole my thunder, Arda, because I mean, Jacob talking about how there's not that central figure and, you know, that streamer is kind of breaking free as like the number one guy in Valorant. And I love Goatee Shroud. He was great in Uncut Gems, awesome movie. Love the goatee, great job. I'm so happy he's streaming Valorant. He's great at the game. He brings he is a big hitter into the, you know, directory. But I think the number one streamer in Valorant who's not a pro player is Myth. We can't coach the restreaming Myth. He has been on the front line since the start of Valorant, playing, grinding the game. Even when, you know, his Fortnite fans are saying, go back to Fortnite. And, you know, the Valorant, the gatekeeping Valorant fans are like, you're not a pro player. Myth, stop playing. You're a Fortnite player. He has continually grinded at the game. And at the FaZe Invitational, he was pulling over 60,000 at the end of the Sentinels versus TSM series, which, you know, did
great. Great.
And it's not just that he's good. He's very good at Valorant, but he's also an amazing character. I think we've seen it through his Valorant restreams, from the coach myth to referee myth. He has been a really big part of Valorant's growth in terms of its organic growth, where he is kind of just taking it and creating his own thing with it. And I think I mentioned this on Twitter. If you're Riot Games and you're making a 2020 World Championship, whatever you're going to call it, you know, maybe the first official big LAN of all these teams for a Worlds event, Myth has to be on the analyst desk. You have to bring him in. Like, I think he is one of the best personalities right now in the entire scene. He is amazing. Him and Moses would kill it on the analyst desk. So I just want to give a shout out to Myth, who not only provide great content around the Valorant scene on Twitch, but he also, during the esports scene, during his restreams, made it so much fun to watch, especially when TSM was playing. But looking at the scene overall, like we were talking about, like, what am I saying organically? Like, we've seen, like, players like Tens and Wardell and Kiko, they've all grown substantially over the last few months, where it's gone from Wardell being a 100-view streamer to now being 10K on average. And I think the most interesting thing for me is you're seeing a lot more Japanese players start streaming, and we're seeing a lot more Turkish players. CNED, for example, he's streaming. He's getting 5K plus every time he goes on stream. So I do think we're seeing a lot more of the regions that are really caring about Valorant, who are really attaching themselves to Valorant, and they're kind of propping up the players that they're really being attached to. So it's a really exciting time in those regions that where Valorant's working. There's other regions like South Korea where I still feel like it needs a lot of attention for it to actually blow up. Where the Japanese tournaments are all getting 20K plus, 25K plus every time they're on. Korea has a big tournament going on and has 5K during the night, which isn't terrible. But when you have teams like T1 playing, the T1 Korean team, you should expect more viewership. So right now, the regions that are doing well are popping off, and the regions that you might have expected to be huge, kind of some of the European regions, some, especially South Korea, where you would think like, oh, they love League of Legends, they have to love Valorant. That region necessarily definitely needs some work on to get back up there with some of the other regions.
I want to mention just very quickly, obviously BBL Esports defeated Bonk to get into the Allied Esports Odyssey, which we'll talk about in a second. After that, I had a chance to speak with Bonk's head coach, Salah. That interview is part of Coach's Corner, another show that we do here at ESPN Esports, available at youtube.com/ESPN Esports. And Salah said in the interview, if you're a fan of a little bit of tea, if you're a fan of a little bit of fire comments and spicy takes, he says if you put CNED and Wardell in a jet op battle 1v1, CNED would beat him 20 out of 20 times. That is a quote. I am not paraphrasing it.
I do not agree with that. CNED's a very good player, and he has a lot of pop-off moments, but I think from just watching the tournament, in a tournament setting, I don't know in a casual setting versus the two, but I think in a tournament setting, Wardell has proven a lot more than CNED. I do think CNED is not on a pro team. Wardell is on a very pro team, TSM, big salary. He is scrimming, practicing every day, where BBL came together, I believe, 2 weeks ago, and a lot of their players are having day jobs. So if they do get that, that signing, or if CNED does go on that pro team, we might very still his potential be up there or even surpass Wardell. But for right now, I would go with Wardell.
That might have an EU bias to it as well, probably a Turkish bias. It's
a tiny.
B-Site and Flashpoint announced the final NA Ignition event on August 26th to 28th, at least the one that's publicly announced. Pop Flash. This also begs the question, obviously, $50,000 prize pool. There are the 8 teams involved. Obviously, you will see one logo there and be like, there's one logo there. Wait a minute. Is that Dignitas? Dignitas. What is Emily Dignitas? That's a Dignitas logo. By God, that's Dignitas's music.
It is.
What do we make of this, and what do we know? Is there anything that's out there right now? Dignitas.
Emily. You'd have to. I have opinions on like Flashpoint in general. I haven't heard anything about Dignitas.
So let's hear about your
announcement of the actual team. That was the first time I'd heard about it. So you'd have to go to Tyler for that.
So before we get to Dignitas as a team, let's get your thoughts on the Flashpoint tournament in general.
Well, I'm glad to see, because like previously all of the events, like I think FaZe's event was definitely the best for the Ignition series that I've seen. In terms of, like Tyler said, the co-streams, the overall tournament organization, stuff like that. But this is kind of the end of Ignition series pretty much, right? And it was cool. It's cool to see another tournament organizer come in and like have a tournament, because I feel like even with FaZe holding tournaments, even with T1, obviously, and Nerd Street Gamers, like they put a ton of time and effort into organizing these things. I'm not trying to take away from that, but it always kind of felt like Riot was still there, like hosting these tournaments to me a bit. Like they were kind of organizing the thing from behind the scenes. And this to me is like, okay, we're going to allow like another actual tournament organizer to take this entirely over and see what they can do. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what Flashpoint brings from like a production value standpoint specifically. Having watched some of their CS tournaments, their shoulder content is really awesome. They do a really good job with it. So I'm super curious to see how they handle this tournament, and I hope it kind of sets a standard for tournaments to come just based on what I've seen from them in CS.
Things I just want to point out about that before we dive into Dig. One, I'm actually really happy to see that they're opening the funnel a little bit for B-Site, which is the parent organization that owns Pop Flash and Flashpoint, because Flashpoint was you were only allowed to participate if you qualified or if you were a partner team and paid a $2 million franchise fee. And the biggest criticism of Flashpoint as a result was that the teams participating in Flashpoint were bad. That was the criticism. Other than like MIBR and Gen.G, basically the entire competition was crap. Everybody else that was good played in ESL Pro League. Mad Lions is solid too, so give a little bit of a nod. But nonetheless, they kind of opened that funnel. T1 is not a partner team of Flashpoint at this point. Sentinels is not a partner team of Flashpoint at this point. They're both in this tournament, right? Like, so that's exciting because they are some of the best teams in the game. And then the other thing, to Emily's point, like, I don't always agree with Thorin. I don't always agree with Monte Cristo. What I do have to tip hat to them for a little bit, though, is the fact that, like, Flashpoint's content, despite how terrible the competition was, the content was very, very
insanely good.
Was very good. And I understand they're not going to have the same level of studio access they will because of COVID. But nonetheless, I am excited to see them be able to do as much as they can while socially distanced and at home for this tournament, because I think that's the next step in Valorant tournaments is sort of like shoulder content around the actual competition itself.
I respect Monty's hustle. You may not agree with his opinions all the time, but you got to respect the fact that he does create good content for an esports audience. And I think
100%.
that will definitely continue here in this tournament. This is not a leading question, Tyler. I promise you, okay?
Yeah, okay.
But
all right.
which players, as it pertains to Dignitas's Valorant roster, which players will no longer be homeless, Tyler?
Oh my God! I thought you would allude to it a bit more subtly, Arda. A little bit more subtly. I can't.
Question. Not. I am just asking it. I'm just asking it the way I would normally ask.
Let's go, Harrison Chang.
So all right. So yes, Dignitas has signed the roster. I've multiple sources have said that they believe it is homeless that will be the Dignitas roster. I have nothing officially confirming that. I feel like pretty confident. I would probably say 95% it is homeless, especially when you're going into this tournament where if it is homeless, they would be my top 8 teams currently in North America. That would be the snapshot of all top 8 teams in my recent NA power rankings. FaZe may be the only team really missing out on that conversation, but FaZe is such a new roster. Monty kind of mentioned that in, he had a Threat on Valorant competitive where he was talking like, why wasn't FaZe invited? They didn't have a roster 2 weeks ago, which makes a lot of sense. I'm very excited for Pop Flash because way back, like one of our first Valorant shows, I said tournaments are coming. Big organizers, like established organizers like Valorant, they want to invest in Valorant. And Flashpoint was one of those organizers. They were trying to put on a very big tournament in the beta phase. I believe it was supposed to be scheduled at the end of May, but as we all know, at the end of May, that was right when the game got its servers cut off and the game went into dark mode before the official release. So Riot didn't sign off on it. They didn't get the green light, but finally, after months of trying to get a tournament in Valorant, they now have the final and 4th Ignition Series tournament. And I'm excited for not only seeing Dignitas's debut, I'm excited to see that we're going to see a lot of new casters. DDK, who was kind of the star of the FaZe Clan Invitational, Sean Gayers, they did an excellent job casting. I just want to shout out those two. They have, I think we've had a lot of good casting in Valorant, Simo, Golden Boy, a lot of really good casting. I just think DDK and Sean Gayers were excellent. I just want to give them a personal shout out, and I'm very happy to see DDK at the tournament. But we're also going to see Potter and Doa. Doa, our guy, who we've had on shows before. He's a commentating legend. Him, Monte Cristo over in South Korea with the OGN Champions days, obviously then transferred to Overwatch League when that started. Now he's getting his first chance in Valorant. I'm excited to see Doa casting Valorant because he's one of the best personalities you have in the commentating game. So we're not only seeing the debut of Dignitas, but I'm very excited to see more DDK, and I'm excited to see Potter and Doa both have their first chances commentating the game on a big level, because we're talking about all these like players, right? Like, oh, these players are trying to get to this upper echelon. They're trying to make a name for themselves. These organizations are trying to get really good first impressions. It's the same with casting, right? There are so many people who want to cast this game right now. Every tournament for these guys is a tournament in themselves to see if they can break through with the fans and if they can get to that next level. And I think this is the big chance for Doa and Potter both to say, hey, we are two of the best casters in Valorant. We need more events. And I think DDK and Sean Gayers at FaZe Clan Invitational prove that they are two of the best casters right now in the scene.
Can I just make a quick point before Jacob and Emily, you jump in? Tyler, you're a former StarCraft guy, right?
Yes, love StarCraft.
Tastosis set the tone for all future commentary, right?
Yeah.
You remember that fondly. The conversational style, basically
so good.
Both people did the roles of play-by-play and color. Here's the problem with that. because there have been a lot of casting teams since Tastosis that have tried to replicate that style, in particular so far in Valorant. And I am coming at this from someone with 20 years of broadcast experience, including play-by-play. Here is why DDK and Sean Garris are actually the best Valorant commentary duo out there today, okay? And they proved it in one event. Tastosis is an exception, not the rule. Tastosis were excellent together, but they succeeded in spite of the roles of the commentary duo. DDK and Sean Garris played specific roles on the Valorant cast, Tyler. DDK played the role of play-by-play. Sean Garris played the role of analysis. And the reason that is important, even though you can disagree with me on this because there are some great commentary duos out there, but the reason it is important and the reason they shine so bright was because we've seen a lot of this tennis back and forth with commentary duos where the formula is, let me play-by-play for 10 seconds, and then you play-by-play for 10 seconds, and then maybe I have 20-30% of analysis to throw in here, but I'm going to describe what's happening. Then you describe what's happening. Then I'm going to describe it again. Whereas DDK and Sean Garris, DDK was describing with detail what was happening and then laid out to allow Sean Garris to give you the name of the actual role, color, add color to what I'm seeing. Tell me why it's happening. Don't tell me just what's happening. And that's why it was successful, because Sean Garris is in a good position to do that. He spoke in short sound bites and gave me more information than I needed about the moments. Something to consider for future commentary.
Yeah, I mean, I actually love this a lot as someone who, I spent a lot of time around these people over the years, hung out with them in green rooms and various different things at events over the years at E-League and in Face It in London, etc. I have rarely seen Sean commentate, and I was impressed for the lack of, I'm sure he's studied up, he's a smart dude, he would educate himself, but like, Sean is almost like the token analyst all the time. Like, it would be like he is almost always on a desk at an event when he works it. He very rarely gets to step on the mic like that. And I was very impressed to see him paired, right? And also, like, DDK is not often paired with him. This is not, like, these guys didn't have I'm sure they did some practice, but they don't have a ton. Like, we usually see DDK with James Bardolph, who also works at Face It, right? Like, those are the guys. And I was really impressed by that duo. And much love to Potter also. I think so many people don't recognize her talent enough. I have talked to Monte Cristo about her before, so I understand, and he is leading the charge on this tournament. And he's the top executive at Flashpoint at this point, or at B-Site at this point from an operational perspective. So, you know, like, it is great to see her getting that opportunity because she's awesome. Potter is awesome. She's a really intelligent analyst. She can really deep dive into things. She's a ex-CS pro herself. You know, like she's skilled, and she has not gotten as much love as she deserved up until Flashpoint recently. She was a shining star there, and I'm excited to see her be able to take her talent to Valorant.
Emily, more thoughts on... Well, if you have any...
I mean, I think the thing I would bring up about caster duos in Valorant, and because the whole Tastosis thing doesn't really apply to something like League of Legends, right? Where you do have very set roles in terms of color caster and play-by-play, outside of like LCK is working through some stuff because they had visa issues, so they have to have 2 play-by-play casters on the desk at times. I know LPL has also done this as well, just to give some of their color casters a break to rotate people in and out. But I mean, the thing we have to understand about Valorant, and the thing that makes a person like Sean so valuable in this kind of scenario, is that, I feel like we're going to look back on this time of Valorant and be like, wow, our analyst, our analysis sure was poop back then, because like we still know like nothing about all the layers that can come with this game. Right. And so here is where I think having someone who is used to, from comms or from like a coaching standpoint and from an analyst desk standpoint, obviously, like Jacob alluded to, someone who's really familiar with CS, who can like dispense information in a way that people understand really easily and have it be as strong of analysis as we can get in this game right now. And I think that's like listening to their casting. That's what really set them apart for me in Valorant specifically, because we don't really have that. And that's not a slight against anyone else who's casting this game, by the way. It's like everyone's learning, like everyone is learning how this game is going to be. And it's not just a one-to-one translation from CS to Valorant because of the abilities specifically, and how that affects the actual fabric of the game. So that's what impressed me the most about the DDK Shangare's pairing, was actually that you did have someone who not only is able to analyze the game, but the skill of being able to dispense information like that in a really clear and concise way that people at multiple levels of their own gameplay can understand and apply it to what they're seeing is like honestly invaluable. And I don't think it's like, again, something that we've really seen in Valorant thus far until this past weekend. Or not this past weekend, but the FaZe Invitational.
I can have this conversation for hours, and one day, if you want it, I will happily have a caster stream with all of you for several hours because I have many, many thoughts on it. But leave you with this. Speak in sound bites. Speak in sound bites. Speaking of sound bites, Jacob spoke with Jerome of Prodigy. He is their CEO. And this is going to lead us to our next topic, our last topic on the show, the EU scene in general. Here's what Jerome had to say about what Valorant EU looks like right now.
You mentioned this, but why do you think that European teams, organizations, have been slower to get into the space than some of the American ones?
Yeah, at least that's my opinion, but I think that there are several reasons on that. The first one is that I think it has always been the case. European organizations are already a bit more cautious than in the US to invest into a new game. And also, I think that the main reason is that we had a lot of stacks in Europe. Let's say French teams like started from CS, EPP, Swedish team like Fabric and so on. But the difference with the North American market is that an organization, let's say from France or Sweden, let's take Sweden, let's take a Swedish organization. It's really hard for them to pick a full French roster, right? Mm-hmm. Because of the market, because of the audience, because of the sponsors, because of the talent pool. Like if you have a full stack roster of French players, then you know that in the future, if you want to replace a player, then you will have to pick a French player. You will probably have to pick a French coach, a French manager. And then that's really complicated for the future, for the long term. Most of those organizations right now, they are looking at Valorant for the long term, right? So it's easier in the US because you have only US players, Canadian players, they all speak the same language. So you can pick a roster that is successful. It will be efficient for the organization, right? While, let's say, I don't know, Party Parrots, they were probably one of the best team at the moment, but it's really hard for a European organization to pick a full CIS roster for many reasons. Like they don't have that much audience, they don't speak English, some of them, so it's really hard. So I think that's the main challenges right now for the organizations. That's mainly that, I would say. That's why they are looking to build rosters mainly. So they can have everything they need, like English communication, they can pick their own manager, own coach, then they can also have players from different countries for the market, for the sponsors. That is one of the main reasons, I would say.
Yeah, we have seen a few big organizations enter EU in particular. G2 Esports, Team Liquid, Ninjas in Pajamas, Fun Plus Phoenix recently also signing the mix of the Party Parrots players plus a few others. Do you think we're going to see more soon, or do you think that it's going to take a long time for European organizations to really be sold?
I think that right now most of the organizations are waiting to see how the game is growing, how the scene will develop itself. I would say they are waiting for Riot's plan, even if they are normally aware about the plan. But I would say that depending on the players that can potentially switch to Valorant, like some superstar player from CSGO, then it should accelerate some organization that will say, okay, we need this player and we need to build around him. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure that we will see other massive organization in the next few weeks. But I'm confident that we will see a lot of this organization jumping into Valorant by the end of the year, or maybe a little bit before, or 2021. What I know is that they are all scouting the market. They are all interested by the market. They are all studying the revenue streams, what is doable, and so on. So it's just a question of time now.
So that full interview with Jerome will be available as soon as this show concludes at youtube.com/ESPN Esports, Jerome's client Nitro. That interview with Jacob in written form is now available at ESPN.com/esports, so you can check out both of them after the conclusion of this show. We're going to end talking about Allied Esports Odyssey. We obviously have to mention the fact that G2 and David P, unfortunately David P lost his father during a matchup and had to attend to that, a family emergency. So certainly our thoughts and prayers and condolences go to David P's family. He did decide to play the matchups today with G2, and G2 honored that request and honored that, so he did play. But certainly there will be absolutely, positively, out of respect, we will not mention, G2 losing in any negative light or dunking or anything like that. This is a moment to send condolences to David P. Aside from that, however, David P is continuing to stay on the lineup, so we will analyze the teams that are currently in the Allied Esports Odyssey. Team Liquid, undefeated right now. Fun plus Phoenix, same thing. Tyler, some high-level thoughts here on what you're seeing from the Allied tournament thus far.
I'm so excited about Team Liquid. I actually think Team Liquid has impressed me the most of every team. I think FBX, obviously, they're gonna look green since they are a green team, bringing in a lot of different players to play under this banner. I haven't been practicing that together that long. But Team Liquid, I think, has turned the corner this tournament. I know it's very small sample size. We still have to see them in the playoffs. They still have to topple G2 to really be called like we're really turning a corner here. But I feel like they're comfortable, and I feel like they have found kind of their rhythm, where Link has kind of become that primary operator. He has been very, very good this tournament on the stage, playing that primary operator role. He's looked a lot more comfortable than he did the last tournament, where him and Eccles were kind of trading off with the operator. Eccles now, without having to be that operator, that primary op player, can now kind of just be that in-game leader that he's so good at. So he's now freed up just to think about the in-game leading. And now Scream has wanted to play Arena for so long, and they're kind of letting him go loose. And I think when you have Mr. Headshot Machine on your team, and he wants to play that Arena, and he's having games where he's having 75% headshot accuracy in a pro tournament versus FBX, who is one of the better teams in Europe, is ludicrous. It's ludicrous. And if you're going to make Reyna work, you need someone like Scream piloting her, and he has played her to perfection. He is the most fun I've been watching. He's the most fun Reyna I've seen in pro play of anyone, and it really just comes down to those pure mechanics he has. And I feel like they're finally getting that full swing of things where they got that primary operator in Link. Eccles now feels more comfortable being only as, playing that smoke role of Brimstone and Omen, being that team leader. And Scream, while he's still playing that battle stage, he's playing a lot more Reyna, and he feels very comfortable in that role where he is getting those 25 kill games, 30 kill games, where he is doing the damage on Reyna, which you want to see from a player when they pick that agent. So overall, Soulkiss is doing great on the Rays. Like, I'm really excited about Team Liquid. Like, last tournament, they seemed very disorganized. They didn't have the primary operator. They seemed like they were still trying to feel each other out, where this tournament, I don't think they are head and shoulders above any team, but I do feel like they're turning the corner, and we're finally starting to see that Team Liquid that, the organization invested. Because if Mr. Headshot Machine is he has that momentum behind him, I don't think there's anyone in EU that can stop him. He is playing at a high level right now. When you have that kind of X factor, they're really hard to meet. And I really want to give kudos to Link to kind of picking up that operator role and really shining on it. Everyone on their team is singing right now. They're all shining. And Team Liquid right now for me would be the favorites of the tournament. I think they look very, very strong.
Yeah, I think if anyone's going to take out G2 in Europe, like Tyler and I had talked about this on his power ranking show 2 weeks ago, but we talked about like quote unquote fish 1, 2, 3, but TL, and how they were still like in flux after Artist left and trying to figure out what they wanted to do, and having a Scream on Reyna really wasn't working because they weren't able to support how aggressive he had to be to, kind of rally around him, especially without the primary ops. So the fact that they look like they figured it out at this tournament is, it makes me happy because I've always been a fan of the Fish 1, 2, 3 since, very early days. I think the other thing we have to talk about is the first looks at this FPX roster, which we have talked about how the lineup would work. I think you're seeing, obviously, we're going to put the G2 match aside. I think they still would have won, but, we kind of have to put like a small asterisk on that because of what happened. But this roster looks like if they actually do end up unlocking the potential that this roster has, they will be insanely formidable. Like, you can see the flashes of how it can work. They're obviously not coordinated enough. This is their first tournament, right? Like, so they had, I think the Giants match is probably the biggest slip up, right? Where you have them losing and then going 13-0 on Ascent. So I think I'm really interested in what I've seen from FPX thus far. I do think that it's really early to be talking about, because I know a lot of people are already like, are they going to have communication issues? Are they going to have language barrier, et cetera, et cetera? And like, we kind of brought that up when you're mashing all of these players together, like top players from two former top EU teams. But I think obviously the talent was already there and we knew that on paper, but now we've seen it in action and it's definitely there. It's just a matter of them playing more together and figuring out how they want to play and who they want on what and everything. So I've been really excited to watch them though, even with slip ups like the Giant series.
Jacob, what have you made of the new faces on the scene? Obviously, the FPX G2 match aside, FPX and Ninjas in Pajamas, relatively new, but Team Liquid as well. What do you make of their performances so far?
Yeah, I'm excited about this FPX roster. More generally, I'm sad that we saw the teams that they kind of come from split up, because I would have liked to have seen like people like Party Parrots and Full continue. Another team that's actually in here and not anybody's really talked about is Giants. That series with FPX was confusing because they Giants took game one and then FPX ran them over 13-0 the following match, which is just I don't know how this happened other than maybe I don't want to say they fluked in game one, but you don't want to talk about underrepresented countries. There's a lot of Spanish players in here because of Giants, because Giants is a Spanish national organization, and these are countries other than Mixwell, we've not really talked about Spanish players as much in Valorant as we have in some other games. So I'm super excited to see that. Some of these other people like BBL, like Giants, getting sort of a look in this event. Because I just think Europe is generally more unrefined. I don't think it's that. I think that from a skill perspective, G2 and Liquid definitely could compete on the international stage really well and potentially even win tournaments. But nonetheless, I think that because there's not been as much money invested in European Valorant as North American Valorant, we haven't seen as much talent as we are capable of seeing in terms of the depth of talent, less so the actual skill of talent.
Yeah, I think the thing that's the most obvious point of this, and I think people can disagree, is saying, Europeans have better strategic strategies and tactics than NA. I think the big reason here is we're seeing in NA, TSM and Sentinels going back and forth with strategies. They are figuring ways to beat each other's greatest strengths back and forth, back and forth. TSM had the double off that looked unbeatable. Sentinels came in during the PAX Arena tournament having a set plan to defeat them, and they did that. And then TSM came back at FaZe Clan to beat Sentinels' game plan. So we're seeing strategies evolve as tournaments go along. When you look at EU, G2 has literally used the same two compositions over the last month. They literally, 4 of the 5 players have not played a different agent in the last month. The only difference is that Artist will play Raze on Split. Other than that, they always play the same 5 agents every single map. And they have not been pushed to be, to have counter strats, to think of ways to get defeated, or even to change up their play because they haven't been pushed. So I think this tournament is really going to be good. David P, the tragedy to the side. I think for G2, this is going to be a great tournament. I think Carlos is happy. I think Carlos mean, I've talked to Carlos, and he wants competition. He wants to trash talk people. For the last month, he's been trash talking North American teams because no one in Europe has been able to even touch his team. Finally, I think FPX and Team Liquid are two sides that definitely can contend against him, and I think pushing G2 and making them change up their compositions, having to look at themselves, having to look up different strategies and think of different ways to win the game instead of, hey, Mitch, we'll pop your ult, let's just do jet things and we'll win mechanically because artists can aim better than the other operator. Like, when they can actually have to get pushed and change up their strategies and think of ways to beat FPX and beat Team Liquid and beat their identities, that's when we're going to see Europe go to a next level. Where I think right now G2 is really over just out-muscling teams, but I think finally with this tournament we're going to start seeing the seeds of rivalries with FPX, Team Liquid, and G2 kind of as the three kings of Europe, with NIP, BBL, and other teams kind of making up the fourth spot.
I want to defend the perception of Europe as an innovative region for a minute, because I think you don't see, because of the infrastructure problems that we've discussed, right? That no one's picking up 5 stacks. We have like really talented, interesting 5 stacks that are all from like one country that just aren't getting picked up, right? Whenever they do get picked up, something like FPX, where they're like, we're going to take part of this team and part of this team, we're going to combine them and see what happens. I think the innovation from European teams does not come from repeatedly facing each other, because that has not happened, right? Because rosters have disbanded before that's been allowed to happen, before like actual rivalries have developed. But what I will defend is the ability for European teams, and we're seeing it right now with Liquid, in finding their own play style when they come up against obstacles. So like, again, returning to Fabrican, what happened when they didn't have a Sage player? They're like, we're not going to play Sage. We're going to find a way to not play Sage. We're going to, bake that into our play style, and that is going to be our defining play style. And they were the ones that made people pay attention to it, all the way over in NA when TSM started trying Sageless comps after. Yes, I realize that Wardell said it was because they're bored, but that's not the entirety. That's not the entirety of the truth, right? So I think when you look at European innovation, what I will defend and where I think that comes from, in my opinion, is the fact that European teams, especially with these 5 stacks, are all from one country. You aren't going to have like superstars stacked top to bottom, right? Like even the original Fish 1-2-3 roster, yes, you have artists, but like it's not like, oh man, we're just stacked, right? Like you have to find ways to get around weaknesses in your lineup, be that an agent or someone is not comfortable with a specific gun. And we've seen Team Liquid now, again, like hopefully the Liquid organization will continue to give them more infrastructure, more time to develop as a unit and more resources, because now we're seeing them figure it out. We're seeing who they want to put on the op. We're seeing Scream be super successful on Reyna because his team can support him being that aggressive. And that is where I will defend European innovation, because apparently I'm the EU apologist on this show.
Speaking of EU, Tyler, is your power ranking show EU based this Monday?
It is. I'm still trying to chisel down a guess. We're going to see if we can make it a bit earlier, because usually our EU shows are at 6 p.m., which is about 2 a.m. in the European time, which a lot of our European guests can't join because it's very, very late at night. So we're still figuring it out. But yes, tentatively this week will be Europe, as we are, coming off of the next Ignition Series tournament that will end this weekend. And then the next weekend after that will be an NA tournament, or an NA powering, NA EU off and on every other week, bi-weekly.
Certainly judging by whatever major tournament is happening, which right now in EU is the Allied Esports Odyssey event that is ongoing. But by Monday, it will be complete, and Tyler will have his ranking show. And, of course, we have this show every single Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern usually. Jacob has his written interview with Nitro up at espn.com/esports. Also, the video interview with Jerome, the CEO of Prodigy, will be available at youtube.com/ESPN Esports. I do have one more question. We had a lot of reporting on this show today. For those that did not catch the beginning of the show, basically the main topic was Nitro. Where could he go? Which team would he land on in Valorant? Tyler and Jacob have been heavily chasing this story, and basically the reporting is right now there is no official deal in place as of yet. However, the leading candidate in deep discussions is 100 Thieves. My last question, Emily, I'll ask it to you. This is not about 100 Thieves. but I'm just curious. This is just a curiosity question, okay? This is just a curiosity question. Do you think that Depth, Lasky, Psalm, Superman, and Poise like the colors black and gold?
I hope they do. I hope they do.
What do you guys think? Hard yes?
I always like seeing people find a home, Arda. I always like very talented people finding a home.
I need to take Def to a socially distanced lunch because he lives down the street from me, and like ask him about.
Random.
Wait, he has a home? I thought he was homeless.
Wait a minute, what?
Wow.
Breaking news.
Breaking news.
Wolf bomb here. What's going on?
They're not actually homeless.
That'll do it for us here on the ESPN Esports Valorant show. Don't forget, every Thursday and Monday, check out Tyler's Power Ranking show. We'll see you next week.